Hello, critical thinkers. Thanks for tuning in, and welcome to another engaging edition of Critical Mass TV. This is the show that doesn't just encourage you to think outside of the box. We want to know why our minds are caged in the first place. Is someone out there able to control our thoughts and our behavior by limiting what we hear? Would a tiny ruling elite try to take working people out of the equation by filling their heads with myth and superstition, distraction and fear? Remember that politics is the never-ending struggle for power, and that ultimate power comes from those who decide what is produced and how it's distributed. In our country right now, about 1,000 super rich white guys have this absolute power. This cult of greed, which I like to call the hallucinati, invests in their own power by absolute domination of the economy, the media, and our vast corporatist political system. Luckily for us, this apparatus completely relies on our complacency and can change dramatically if we learn to organize together, resist effectively, and speak truth to power. In this election year, let's vow to resist both magical thinking and dog whistle politics. Let's work to reduce the corruption of our democracy by big moneyed interests. Every successful movement for the people has resulted from a critical mass of the grassroots. Let's practice some mixed mental arts for our intellectual self-defense. So it's Sunday, March 16th. Another crispy Vermont day, to say the least. And we're live at the VCAM studios in beautiful Burlington, Vermont. Reappearing with me tonight is local anti-GMO activist Matthew Ennis. He is here so we can continue our conversation about genetically modified organisms in our food supply, and the public's right to know what is in our food supply. So we're here to talk with Matthew about that, and also what he has been doing here locally and lately. So, hi Matthew, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brad.
You are quite welcome, anytime. So, several of us saw the film GMO OMG by Jeremy Seifert last night at Main Street Landing. And I was impressed by just what an outstanding documentary it was. So the plot of it is Jeremy is basically a concerned father who is in search of answers. How do GMOs affect our children, the health of our planet, and our freedom of choice? And perhaps the ultimate question, which Seifert tests himself, is it even possible to reject the food system currently in place, or have we lost something we can't gain back? So we recorded the question and answer session after the film, and the quality and the substance of the exchange was really impressive. So here it is in its entirety. It involved filmmaker Jeremy Seifert himself and farmer Will Allen, State Senator David Zuckerman, and Falko Schilling from VPIRG, or the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. And they were taking questions from the audience after the film. First, we'll show the trailer for the film and then the question and answer session. So, could you do that for us, Jim?
world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief.
Yeah, I'm in search of food that's not genetically modified. It's kind of a quest I'm on.
And I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light.
I need to sit down and tell you about how angry I get when they say they're going to feed the world.
For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
The corn we see growing around here is actually registered as a pesticide, but it's also a food.
Well, that's debatable.
Is there a pretty good likelihood that I'll get an interview with someone at Monsanto, or? She said, you need to leave right now.
And I think there's something extremely wrong when a government becomes captive to one industry.
Anything that's too big to fail is too big.
Monsanto threatened to sue the state.
There's nothing to hide, then disclose it.
People have a right to know what they're putting in their bodies.
If it's not organic, it is genetically modified feed.
I don't even know what that is.
What the hell is that?
What is it?
What are they?
Tell the truth. Reveal.
GMO? What's that?
Genetically modified organism.
Oh.
It's...
We moved from LA to Asheville about a year ago. So the way this is going to go, we'll do Q&A for about 15-20 minutes, and then Falko, the man, is going to come up and answer specific questions to the State Labeling Initiative in Vermont. So you can save those questions for what's going on here for when he comes up. So do you have any questions? In the back.
Can you repeat the question before you answer it?
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
I'm being interviewed.
Yeah.
I was seeing a picture of the butterfly on the seed cabinet that your son had. I mean, I'm not seeing monarch butterflies, and you know that's. I've read that this is one reason that they're landing in these fields and insects are being poisoned by the plants.
Well, okay, so the question about the disappearance of monarchs or the reduced population, I mean, the main reason for that is Roundup. And since GMOs were released, Chuck Benbrook came out with a study recently showing that Roundup has increased by 527 million pounds over that period of time. Roundup, of course, kills everything, and farmers have been using more of it because the crops are Roundup ready. And the Roundup has been killing all the milkweed around the fields. And milkweed is what monarch butterflies lay their eggs on, and the babies, you know, feed on that. So that's definitely a direct correlation to the decreased population. Yeah. And Roundup has also recently, a peer-reviewed study just came out a month ago or so, linking Roundup to celiac disease and gluten intolerance because of what it does to the gut. Yeah.
Did you go to college and if so, what did you major in?
Wow.
What was the question?
She asked if I went to college and what I majored in. I was an English lit major. Which means, yes! It means I read a lot of great books and wrote some papers and then had no idea what to do with my life. No skills for the world. So I became a garbage man in Arkansas. I did for like 3 months. It was really exciting. And then the first film I made is called Dive, Living Off America's Waste. It's about dumpster diving and food waste. And I had been talking and wanting to make a film, and my wife kind of just put her thumb on me and said, well, why don't you make a film and see if you're any good at it? So I made Dive, $200 budget in the living room, production, and this is my second film. So, yeah.
It's a beautiful film, and I want to thank you for making it, and I see the artistry that you bring to it, and it's beautiful. And thanks for using the whole platform of GMOs to expose more people to the issue. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. More like that is great. Yes.
Is there any way for organic gardeners to protect themselves from cross-pollination and stuff coming through on the wind?
Will Allen, where are you? Do you want to talk about that briefly? I mean, contamination. Will is an organic farmer.
We really don't have any way to protect ourselves. My farm is surrounded with GMO corn, and what's happened in Vermont since 2003, there's only 8% of Vermont corn was GMO. Now it's 90%. Oh. There's 82,000 acres, and so it surrounds most of our farms. And so I can only grow corn until their plants start to tassel. As soon as their plants start to tassel, I can't sell any corn during that tasseling period because I can have contamination, and the same kind of things that's happening with health problems with GMOs will be happening to my corn. So we have to give up about a month of corn production. In Vermont, that's a lot of corn. Yeah. So there's really not anything you can do to protect yourself. The big thing we have to do is to try to get them to stop it.
And the FAO just came out with a report, I think it was today or yesterday, showing that 25 countries around the world have banned imports of certain foods finding contamination. So that definitely hurts farmers here. Yeah.
I find that one of the biggest challenges as a mother is actually finding food that's GMO free and seeing that when things are indeed labeled, the companies that make those foods unfortunately are owned then by huger companies that are in support of them. So how do you now feed your family and feel good about it, and are your kids still being eating McDonald's?
They never have eaten from McDonald's, except for when my wife's parents took them to McDonald's. While making this film, the irony of it. So yeah, I mean, it is difficult to shop. But I mean, the organic label is real and very much intact, and organic means that it can't have GMO ingredients, also no toxic pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, sewage sludge. So we eat mainly organic, probably 99% or more in our home, but when we're traveling, it's more difficult. And then you also have the non-GMO Project Verified certification, which is a pretty rigorous process to certify foods. And that also gets a little confusing because you have non-GMO Project Verified frozen blueberries. But blueberries, there are no GMO blueberries out there. So that also causes some confusion with people and consumers. So. Yeah.
Bill McKibben spoke of the hopefulness of the statistic of more farms in the last few years than reducing number of farms. Could you explain the significance of that for the movement?
It's a great significance that, for the first time in a long time, we now have an increase of farms. And that also correlates to an increase of farmers markets, which have grown by leaps and bounds over the last decade. So people are waking up to their food, and they're wanting fresh food, and they want closer relationships to farmers. CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, has also grown over the last decade. So that's why that's happening, and it's a great thing. The problem is that your average farmer is, how old, Will, do you know right now?
Well, not as old as me, but about 60.
Yeah, well, I thought you were only 60.
I wish I were.
So, with the loss of biodiversity, we also are experiencing a loss of the knowledge being passed down to future farmers. So there's a great need for young people to take up farming. Yeah?
Did you come across any Agent Orange 2,4-D GMOs when you were out looking about?
I did not, but that is happening in a big way right now. Because of resistance to Roundup, they're transitioning to harsher, more toxic chemicals, and one of those is 2,4-D, the main ingredient from Agent Orange. So I think the current use is around 5 million pounds per year of that, and it could increase up to 100 million pounds. So that, yeah.
Would it be reasonable to ask one of our representatives how they feel about fighting the big agribusinesses, Monsanto and all the other companies that are producing this, but they have the money and the power to defeat the public in so many states? How do we go around that?
Is Senator Zuckerman still here? Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I just looked at a picture of my daughter at a friend's house.
Like, what is she doing?
Okay, we have Monsanto, who puts in so much money, and all the other companies put in so much money into our politics, and we have no control of. How do we get control of that and fight these bastards?
Well, I would say a couple things. One is in Vermont being a relatively small state, you have much more direct ability to influence your legislators. Senator Ash is one of 5 senators, I don't know if he's still here, on the Judiciary Committee. He had to leave. He had to leave, okay. But folks can still call him. He's actually very good about reading his email and listening to phone calls. It's very hard for us to get back to every single person, but so Senator Ash is one of 5 people on the Judiciary Committee. He's also extremely intelligent. And so if we provide him with facts, he can potentially help persuade some of his colleagues on the committee to thwart the real attempt to undermine GMO bills right now, which is to put triggers on them that make them sort of unattainable triggers. And I'm sure you know about that with Connecticut and Maine.
Yeah.
But really, it's people power. And in Vermont, the organizations that are working on it have done a lot of work to build social media connections and get out the calls, scenarios. And, in Chittenden County, we have 6 of the 30 senators. So there's some real potential power there. I know Senator Snelling is supportive, but concerned about the lawsuit. And that's what I hear from most of my colleagues. And so pointing out that the significance of passing this legislation is significantly more important than the concern out of a $1.6 billion budget of having to spend $2 to $5 million to defend ourselves.
Defend yourselves against what? What are they suing the states for?
So the potential suit, and sorry if we're going us.
Great.
There's 2 main issues of potential lawsuit. One is around free speech, and there's 2 subparts to that. Compelled speech, saying you have to put a label on a package as compelling speech, and that can be sued under First Amendment rights to have your own free speech and not speak. The other is free speech that we're saying in this bill you also can't label food as natural, which you pointed out in the movie, or naturally made or naturally derived, because as I think also someone was quoted, it's of course not natural. And so we would be restricting speech because you couldn't use that terminology on your label. And the third arena that they would potentially sue us under is interstate commerce and federal jurisdiction. And we've actually, through work with the Right to Know Coalition and VPIRG and lawyers at Vermont Law School and Legislative Council, have worked very judiciously to craft a bill that we think would pass those legal challenges for a variety of reasons that I could get into more detail on if people want to afterward. I want to make sure I don't go in too deep into the weeds. But those are the reasons they would sue.
And Falko, in just a few minutes, can also address some of those issues too. Thanks for that. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention too, one thing, we talked a lot about the food and GMO, but in the cotton, I noticed was a product that was coming up in your film that I had not really considered, and the toxicity of how that gets into our bodies or just ruins the earth, you know, so I'd be very much interested in seeing that labeling prevalent as well as in food.
Well,
Yeah,
cotton
and it's
is
cotton-
food, though.
Yeah, cottonseed oil
Cotton
is
is
a lot of
food.
food.
Okay, so that's
Because
what
see,
I'm
that
curious about.
the yield of a cottonseed is 60% seed and 30% fiber.
Okay.
And 80% of that seed goes right into dairy cows and mostly into dairy cows and beef cows. And also gin trash, which comes out of the gins, that goes right into dairy cows because it's real high in fiber and real high in oil. And the name of the game in dairy is butterfat content. So cotton is a big food deal.
Yeah, and probably some of the clothes you're wearing are genetically modified cotton.
Right, but I didn't think that
Most of them.
Yeah.
until, so.
Yeah, and there's a great film. There's a great film that came out about 2 years ago called Bitter Seeds, and it's actually just set in India because the cotton belt has been renamed the suicide belt.
Yep.
Upwards of 250,000 suicides in what is now the BT cotton belt of Monsanto's cotton. And many of the farmers drink Roundup to kill themselves because they're so in debt and there's no way out. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about your trip to Monsanto and if they've contacted you since then.
Yeah, the trip to Monsanto. Yeah, I visited more than one facility. That one was weird because we were headed out of Des Moines to meet up with my family because I was waiting in Des Moines for the sound man to fly in. And so we stopped at this random Monsanto facility, and I had called a different one about 50 or 100 miles away the day before asking for an interview. But so this one, you know, we put a lav mic under my shirt, set up the cameras, started rolling, and then just drove up, parked, and I jumped out so that nobody would see us or cameras or anything. And right when I opened the door, there was a big dude standing there, and then the secretary was on the phone, and I walked in and said, "Hi," and they both just stared at me, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I wanted to talk to somebody," and she said, hold on. "Yeah, he's right here." And then she handed me the phone, and I said, "Hello," and she's like, "You need to leave right now." And it was the woman at the other facility. It was just weird, and they didn't have any Monsanto hats. Annoying. So the only other thing we've heard from Monsanto is there were some harsh reviews of the film in the Scientific American, which the board of editors of Scientific American have come out against GMO labeling. And the reasons they gave are basically the industry spin for, raising prices, it's going to hurt farmers, and people will just reject them out of fear and ignorance, like they did in the EU. That's their reasoning. And the New Yorker review of the film actually quoted the Scientific American review of the film. And that's when Monsanto started tweeting out that article saying, "Look at this trashy film." So our response to that was we booked the AMC Theater in St. Louis for the film for a week, and we put a big full-page color ad in the newspaper and invited all the Monsanto employees to come for free to watch the film because they hadn't seen it.
Good show.
But nobody took us up on it. So, yeah.
I was just curious about the GMOs that are in vaccinations, and I didn't see any mention of that in your film, and I was just curious what comment you would have on that.
In vaccinations in particular, I mean, I know there's a lot in just regular pills, vitamins, supplements, but possibly vaccinations as well. I mean, there's a lot of GMO pharmaceuticals out there. There was even a spermicidal corn being grown. Yeah, like when I was making this film, it was hard to focus in on, because there's so many rabbit trails, and it really does. When you talk about agriculture, one of my favorite writers that I read while making this film was Wendell Berry.
Yeah.
And he talks about when you take culture out of agriculture and replace that with business and science, the corporate mindset is asking questions of the bottom line, and they're beholden to shareholders. They're not asking questions of human health or health of the environment. So you really have removed people from the equation. And Wendell Berry says it's hard to to say it's GMOs versus organic, or put like two camps butting heads. But he said if you were to do that, he said he would put it in the two camps of one of exploitation versus that of nurture. And everything we consume, whether it's our clothes or food, there's a system behind that. And we're slowly waking up to that. And there can be a system of exploitation, whether of land, water, the earth, people, or a system of nurture. And by its very nature, organic, biodiverse farming regenerates the earth and works within that system of interconnectivity rather than sort of humans over against nature. And you saw that in the film. After post-World War II, it was like, let's take all these chemicals and now we're going to fight nature, as if we weren't nature as well. So, and that's coming back. It's a big backlash that's happening. Maybe one or two more, and then we're going to get Falko up here.
You said that blueberries weren't GMO. I'm curious if that's what you said, right?
I did.
What foods in our market here are GMO? I mean, I know that you said like soy and corn are in a lot of the processed foods that we encounter, but I'm just curious, like, can we look at a certain food and even if it's not organic, know it's not GMO?
Yeah. I mean, most whole foods that you're going to deal with, like a bell pepper or a strawberry, are not GMO. I mean, the main GMOs are corn, soy, cotton, canola, and sugar beets, and those find their way into almost every highly processed food we eat. And then you have crookneck squash, zucchini, and Hawaiian papaya.
But like cane sugars.
And sweet corn.
And sweet corn now that you can buy at Walmart.
No potatoes there. Don't have any.
And they're working on, GMO eggplant, brinjal in India. So cane sugar is not genetically modified. But so like the Breyers ice cream, natural Breyers, it just says sugar. And I always thought, oh, that's cane sugar. Right. But it's not. It's beet sugar. And most likely, since 90% of beets are genetically modified, that would be. So, and then, when you go to the supermarket, the conventional food, that word has been co-opted, and that just really means chemical. So like the conventional bell pepper versus the organic bell pepper, the conventional one has been sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, fungicides, and the organic hasn't. So yeah, the list of GMOs right now isn't very long, but they are the main staple crops that find their way into so much of the processed foods we eat. Yes.
What about wheat?
One more back there, and then Falko.
What percentage of wheat?
Wheat isn't genetically modified.
Yeah, but it's going to be.
There was a quote that you made about wheat. In the film.
Well, there were some trials.
Oh, the rogue GMO wheat.
Yeah.
They discovered, when was this? This was, 6 months ago. I have 3 kids. Very recently, they discovered GMO wheat in a field in Oregon. The farmer was spraying it. He kind of discovered, because it was on the edge of the field and it wasn't dying. And then he sent it to a lab at the university. They tested it and said, yes, this is genetically modified wheat. We can trace it back to Monsanto. And they did field trials in up to 6 to 8 states in mid-2000, like 2004, 5, and 6. The Wheat Growers Association rejected GMO wheat because they knew it would hurt their exports. And yet, here it is turning up randomly in Oregon. So, last question back here, and then Falko.
So I have here about 24 GMO-free shopping guides produced by Occupy Central Vermont. So
nice.
Come and get them.
That wasn't a question.
A little later, after the group, after we split up.
Oh yeah, right here. Yeah, we were mainly funded by Monsanto, DuPont. Wouldn't that be weird? Somebody asked me that question. If Monsanto gave you $5 million to stop making this film, no, it's not a temptation. So I began filming in 2011 in February, and we went to Haiti was the first shoot. That's really what drew me into this whole topic. And that was on credit cards. And then while I was on the road trip, we did a Kickstarter campaign, and that was successful, and we paid off the debt I had already created. And then Lori David came on board, Larry David's former wife. She has an organization called Stop Global Warming. It was amazing that she came on board. Dave Matthews gave us some money. And then Nature's Path Organic Cereal in Canada helped out. Horizon, Dr. Bronner's Magic Soap. So we started getting other people helping us, and we were just always kind of on the edge as we made the film. And the team, is that?
Yes.
Well, the team was very, very small. I wore many hats: producer, director, editor. My friends and I did a lot of the music, besides the obvious cover songs. And then I had a... What's that?
Did the kids get paid?
The kids, yes, we clothe them and we keep them alive. Yeah. So, and then a good friend of mine did most of the cinematography, and then I had, various sound guys working for me throughout. So, Falko, one of the best names ever. He's going to come up just for a few minutes to talk specifically about Vermont and the labeling initiative.
All right, before we do that, can we all give Jeremy So thank you everyone for coming out tonight, and I just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone from the Vermont Right to Know Coalition, from Cedar Circle Farm, Rural Vermont, NOFA Vermont, and VPIRG. It's great to see everyone out here. Just to give you a really quick update of where this bill is now, Senator Zuckerman gave us some really good information, and then also tell you what you can do going forward to help us win. Because we have a really amazing opportunity this year. Right now the bill is in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we've already cleared the House of Representatives, cleared the Senate Agriculture Committee. You need to get out of this committee, get it to the Senate floor, come to some agreement, and then get it to the governor's desk. But to get there, we're going to need to show just how much the people of Vermont want to see GMO foods labeled. And one thing you can help us do tonight is we have a table right out there with all kinds of information about how to write a letter to the editor. Take a minute or two, write 200 words about why you want to see GMOs labeled, why you think that it's really wrong to call GMOs natural when they are not, and leave it with us. If you can't write it tonight, there's self-addressed envelopes. You can send them to VPIRG, write it down, send it to us. What we need to do is we need to make sure that your voices are getting out in your local newspapers and getting out into the community, and that's one great thing you can do. Another great thing you can do is write your senator or call your senator, and personal touches really count. Let them know this is something you're concerned about. Let them know why you're concerned about it personally, and thank them for their work on this, because this is not an easy thing to take up. Anyone who was in the Agriculture Committee and has been spending time looking at this bill for a while, they know there's a lot of very complicated questions. We're doing our best to make it really simple. And so that's just a really quick update on where we are and some of the actions you can take. So please take a minute, write a letter to the editor, submit it to your local paper, and give it to us. Actually, give it to us. We can submit it for you, or if that doesn't work, just make sure you get it in. We want to get the word out, let people know how much the people of Vermont want to see these foods labeled. So that's just really quick update, and I have a minute or two I can take questions if that's helpful.
How about bringing up petitions to the town meetings?
So that town meeting has passed at this point, and if you want to sign on, we do have a petition on our website, vermontrighttoknow.org, which is a great place to go to get the most up-to-date information. You can sign our petition. Make sure you're on our email list, which is how we're letting people know about when they need to take action, when you need to start getting those calls into the State House, when it makes sense to hold back, because sometimes that's really what it's about, being able to get those calls in and then be able to hold back when you've done what you need to do. So I want to suggest everyone, after you've written your letter to the editor, go to vermontrighttoknow.org, sign up for the petition, and make sure that you're getting the latest on the campaign.
The bottom line on this is really how much influence money has on politics and the creation of laws that it has on our judiciary. I mean, this is really how Monsanto has that power. Really, they create the laws, they protect them.
Well, I have to say, I want to echo what Senator Zuckerman said earlier, that Vermont is a little different from a lot of other places. People really care what their constituents have to say about these issues, and they listen, and they're very thoughtful. This is one of the few places where people can make a real difference through campaigns like this. By talking to the representatives and sharing their voice on these issues, we do have a chance to overcome what might be some outside influences, because this is a place that works a little bit differently. So if you take the time and you connect with your legislators, that can make a huge difference.
Falko, I just wanted to point out that a lot of people don't know who their representatives and senators are. Can you give people hints of how to figure out who that is?
You can go to the legislative webpage, and they have a little button right on the side that says, "Who's my representative?" That's a great place to look. Also, there's a button under our action page on VT Right to Know where you can look that up, and you can find that out as well.
There's also a list on the table for Chittenden County.
Thank you so much.
If this does go through and passes, what will it look like when we walk into the grocery store? What are we going to see?
So if you're looking at, say, for instance, a GMO papaya, which is one of those whole foods that we are seeing genetically modified at this point, it would say either on the bin or on the cellophane covering the papaya, produced with genetic engineering. That's what it would say, on the bin or on the package. If you're looking at processed foods, somewhere on the box, it would say partially produced with genetic engineering, or maybe partially produced with genetic engineering. So that's what the bill says as of now. It'd be somewhere on the box. It's not saying it has to be on the front or exactly what size, but that's pretty much what it would look like.
Would fish be labeled?
Yes.
And also meat and dairy, but...
So at this point, with the way that the federal meat labeling regs work, we're preempted from labeling things with hooves and snouts, I believe is the way that they phrase this, and then also poultry under some federal regs, but fish at this point we do have the ability to label, and there's already a GMO salmon labeling bill in place in Alaska. So that's something we do have the power to label.
So if the bill were to pass, how soon after would we see this?
That's a very good question, and that's one of the issues that's really being debated in the State House right now, is how long, so to repeat, the question was, when are we going to, if this bill passes, when are we going to see labels on GMO foods? And that's something that's being debated right now, and that's something that you can help have influence over, is let people know you want to see labels on these foods as soon as possible.
Do they advertise Roundup?
Does who advertise? So the question is, do they advertise Roundup? Does who advertise Roundup?
Monsanto, do they advertise Roundup?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so why not advertise GMOs?
I mean, they advertise them to sell them to farmers to plant them.
Right.
And it's definitely on the label.
Yeah. I mean, technically they aren't the ones that are producing the processed foods. So they aren't advertising that on their label.
My question was to the answer of the senator that he was saying like it was against the first
amendment. Yes.
Just to follow up to the question about what it would look like. So it wouldn't actually say ingredient or GMO.
Right,
corn.
and that, I mean, I won't get into the weeds
GMO,
on
but
this
not tell you what it
because
is.
there are federal regulations around what, that list of ingredients you see on the back of a package with all the ingredients, that is set specifically under federal regulation, and the states don't have the right to change that.
Isn't it true that Vermont is trying to do something a little bit different than the other New England states? Apparently Connecticut and Maine have passed, but they can't do anything about it because they made an agreement that they would wait until all the New England states. Isn't that correct?
They have some complicated language in there that basically says they want to wait to label GMO foods till someone else does it first. And what we're really saying is that labeling GMO foods is not that big a deal. Companies change the labels on their foods all of the time, and Vermont has led the way on a number of issues, whether it's abolishing slavery, whether it's civil unions, whether it's trying to enact the nation's first single-payer healthcare system. This is something that we lead the way on, and it's really not that big of a deal. So we are hoping to move forward and make sure that we can see these labels as soon as possible and not have to wait for other states.
How many states have actually been successful so far?
So far, Maine and Connecticut have passed bills, and both of those go into effect when other states take action, and I can tell you more about the specifics of that later.
Has a legal fund been established?
A legal fund has not been established at this point, no.
Somebody...
I mean, other than the taxes we pay to the Attorney General.
Well, things like that should be done.
I'm all for labeling, but I'm wondering if there's any talk of banning GMOs altogether.
So that's not something that is under the purview of our coalition. Really, the organizations we're working together with, our goal is to label these foods, and that's something that we've come together. And there's organizations that do have that point of view. That's just not something that we're working on as a coalition, and not really the goal of what we're trying to do with this bill.
A little bit of history. that was attempted. I mean, David can talk about it more. But I think 10 years ago?
Well, there's been lots of different bills introduced over time. Here, I'll make it so you don't have to crane your necks the other way, if that's okay, Falko. We've introduced bills to ban it. We've introduced bills to require the seed companies to bear any environmental and legal consequences if a neighbor is contaminated and loses the ability to sell their product. Rachel and I are also farmers, so I know a lot of the issues that Will's talking about as well. We are the only state in the country that actually requires every year the seed companies have to report how much seed they sell, which is why we know the statistics that Will reported earlier as far as specifically in Vermont, how much was sold year by year by year since 2003. Amy was very involved with that when she was head of rural Vermont. And it's amazing how hard that bill alone was to pass. As I said, we passed the liability, the legal bill, and Governor Douglas vetoed that in 2006 or 7. And so we've tried a lot of different things over the years, but really right now, you know, with growing awareness around what it is or that it exists and questions people have and that we're now consuming it more and more than we thought, labeling is really a pretty big nut to crack. And if we can do that and stay focused on this at the moment, I think that's pretty important because really no state has come as close as we are to potentially passing it in a way that will actually have it go into effect. Because ultimately, as I said earlier, the Connecticut and Maine versions are, the way I've been describing it to my colleagues is sort of faux legislation. Because you can say, you pass labeling, but it's never going to go into effect. And both, at least one of them has a trigger that says also if it doesn't happen in a few years, the law goes away. And so really, it's incredibly difficult. We saw the money that was spent in California and Washington on this. And so outright banning, I mean, if you think this is a fight, you've seen nothing. So that's why we got to see what we can do here with this.
All right. Just say one thing about banning, though. There are several counties in several states that have banned GMOs, and that seems to be the strategy around the country, is get it banned in counties, and then that starts a movement in the states.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question, then we'd love for you guys to come talk with us out in the lobby, take a minute, write an LTE, leave it there. So just time for one more question.
I'm not sure who to address this to, but like, what does lobbying look like? Do people come up to you guys in the Senate and say, okay, here's some money, can we just make sure this bill...
I don't really have any money to offer anyone. I say, here's a really good idea, and I know a number of your constituents support this. Let's talk about a way that we can try to make this happen. I mean, you can speak a lot better to this.
How about what?
What about reverse? I mean, what about the Monsanto lobbyists? I mean, are they in the Senate? They come in and say, here's some money, don't pass this bill.
It is not, at our level, it's not quite like that. I will point out that both the Democratic and Republican parties have received money from Monsanto and many other corporate whatevers. And I won't go on and on about that. But it doesn't really work in the State House where sort of a legislator and a lobbyist sit down and it's like an agreement on a $500 or a $2,000 check and then you go out and vote differently. It's more that there are a number of hired lobbyists. There actually is not a specific Monsanto person. They've actually been avoiding the building for the most part. In part because we've actually, one of the things that Vermont has that other states don't and why we have such a real possibility here is we've had discussions about GMOs in rooms like this for 15 years running. And that is not the case in most other states. I would say the average person in Vermont, the level of awareness or the terminology of GMO, you know, if someone had come to Vermonters with a camera and said, do you know what GMO is? You wouldn't have gotten that rate of percentage, you know, not knowing. So we've already started ahead of the game, and I think Monsanto in some ways may have, I don't think they've given up. They're doing what they can by their work, and what lobbyists do is they'll sit with a legislator, someone from Judiciary Committee, and say, you know, you really, if you do go it alone, you know, does Vermont really have the purchasing power to demand this? And otherwise, these companies might not sell their food in Vermont. And so what they do, lobbyists' job is to either sow seeds of doubt or offer facts and information, sometimes more truthful and sometimes less. But it's much, much easier to basically get a politician to say no. It's a lot harder to get us to say yes to something, to changing the way and the laws we all live under. No is a much easier answer. So all they have to do is hover around and offer information to sow seeds of doubt. And that's kind of what that side of the lobbying world does. I wouldn't say it's quite so direct as like, by the way, if you vote no, here's a big campaign check. I'd like to say that, but it's not quite so cut and dry. Right.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And
so it's interesting, just in the last bit of that, that last answer from Senator Zuckerman about how the corporate lobbyists actually work. I mean, probably the most important thing was that they've given money to both the Democratic Party of Vermont and the Republican Party of Vermont. You know, so it's just an implication of you're not going to get any more money if you don't vote our way, and it's probably fairly substantial.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a factor. But that's where we come in, try to convince them, the people, to be in touch with. I mean, the most important thing right now about the labeling bill is people be in touch with their senators, their state senators. And in Chittenden County, we have 6 state senators. Mm-hmm. And you can find out their names and contacts on the Vermont State website under the legislative branch.
Yeah.
And that's really important that people can, email them, call them, ideally write them letters, but,
And the Vermont Right to Know Coalition has that online petition and the forms and whatnot where you can, you can go that route online and,
Yeah, signing the petition online is that means we have more of I think there's 30,000 people that have signed that at this point. Mm-hmm. It means that, more people to sign that, that's great. And then they have contact information for you and they can let you know when it's a good time to be in touch with state senators. But that petition isn't going directly to your state senator.
Right.
So it's good to do both.
Contact them directly.
Yeah, it's going to help because right now we're trying to get a bill through that is a standalone bill that's just for the state of Vermont that has a date certain it's going to start the labeling.
Right.
We're not unlike what they did in Connecticut and Maine, which is needing other states, New England states and New York to be involved, which will be waiting a number of more years for, and we don't want to. We've been waiting too long for this.
So that's what they were talking about. That's a trigger clause, and we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
I think Maine even said 5 contiguous states have to sign on.
Which means they need Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and the New Hampshire House just voted it down barely, and New York and Massachusetts aren't even close to taking it up yet. So if Vermont can lead the way, if Vermont can lead the way on its own, things can move faster for the whole country, and that's what we're working on right now. And it's really important.
Yeah. So Vermont, you think there is a meaningful chance that H-112, which is the GMO labeling bill, could possibly pass through the Judiciary Committee without that trigger clause?
It's possible. It might not, though.
Hopefully.
It might come out of that committee with a trigger clause of some sort. I don't know what it'll say. And then it can change on the floor of the Senate. And then even if it doesn't, if there's some kind of trigger clause, then it has to go to conference committee. So there's different places it can change. But the idea would be to have a standalone bill all the way through.
So did it come out of the House without a trigger clause?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's what passed last spring.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a vote of more than 2-1. It was like 98. I can't remember the vote exactly. High 90s to 40-something.
Right.
So it was like a veto-proof vote, actually.
So that's sort of like Vermont could be, if it's passed in that form, it could be sort of like a breaking of the firewall that's, just metaphorically, that's surrounding at a federal level. If other states see a little bit of courage and people standing up.
And it came so close in Washington State and in California.
Which are big states.
Basically 51 to 49% in both of those states. So really close margins.
And those were labeling laws.
Those were labeling laws like Vermont's doing, but there was a lot of money spent against them. That's why they lost.
It was like $45 million.
$46 million in California, $22 million in Washington State. So a lot of money was spent in deceiving people.
Right.
But, I see this is really important to get this bill through, and it's going to, if we can get it through and we get something going, and it happening, and then it creates a national movement. A lot more people are going to know about GMOs, and that's really important. But this is all going to take time. This is not going to happen instantaneously. Even if we pass a bill, it won't be in effect for 12, 18 months.
Which is already too long.
We've already been waiting too long. So I have other ideas about how to deal with this issue. One is I have this project that I've started, and I've been writing a piece to give to restaurants and bakeries, like an informational piece. And it's basically describing the issue to them and explaining why GMOs are a problem in food and agriculture, and then suggesting to them that they change certain basic ingredients in their
Tell us what those were again.
In restaurants and bakeries, the main ingredients are oils, sugars, soy, and corn products.
Right.
Okay, so that involves a lot of things.
That's a lot. Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes there's some various hidden ingredients that are hard to track, and then there's the whole list of animal products. Like animals, in this labeling bill, it doesn't cover animal products. So animals that eat GMO feed are not going to be covered.
He said that's because of federal law preempts anything that we would do.
Right. So, in terms of restaurants and bakeries, if they're not doing organic dairy or organic meat, they're going to still have GMOs in the mix. But if they can remove, oils that are canola, soy, corn oil, remove those oils, and remove soy and corn products that they're using that are GMO, and remove sugar. I mean, the sugar, if it just says sugar, it's most often beet sugar, which is now over 90% GMO. So it has to be cane sugar, or it has to be organic sugar to not be GMO sugar. So if they could go for those basic items, I would think they could, advertise that they're moving towards GMO free. And it would be a lot more encouraging for some people. I mean, some people don't want to eat out anymore if they really know about this issue, because they don't want to eat GMO food. And I think it would be nice for people. I think there's a lot more people out there that would welcome this and go and eat at these establishments more, because there'd be that most of the food wouldn't be GMO, and I think they would like that.
It is almost like it's not an outright ban, but the reason that Monsanto and some of the other biotech industries are so nervous and are willing to spend $75 million just to try to avoid labeling bills is because it is almost like a de facto ban. They know a very large percentage of consumers are not going to buy that product if it says this product contains GMO ingredients.
Yeah, it's going to take a while, because now our processed food, over 80% of our processed food is GMO.
I think it was 85. Yes,
so it's going to take a while for people to disengage from it. It's not going to be that simple. But if people know and the labels are on there, that's going to start the process.
The consumer backlashes can be really, really powerful, especially with perishable products. If people stop buying it, they will have to make a change to keep their market share. And,
And that's basically what happened with BGH, bovine growth hormone, in dairy. I mean, people just started rejecting it, and now it's not found that as much anymore. It's still being used, but not as much.
And Vermont passed an anti-BGH law, and Monsanto did sue the state of Vermont.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that the history?
Yeah, and we lost in court, but it raised awareness.
It raised awareness,
and it helped actually in the end.
Yeah, so spreading the word.
So in terms of this project I'm doing, the other flip side is that we have another petition, the Vermont Right to Know Coalition, directed towards businesses and food processors and people involved in the food industry. So if we can get bakeries and restaurants to sign on to this, I've done it with a few. If we can get more of them to sign on to this, supporting this legislation, that'll be a help to moving this legislation forward. Because if the senators see that more businesses are supporting it, then it'll give them more courage to support the bill. So I see that as an important step right now to approach these restaurants and bakeries and ask them to support the bill. And then at the same time, I'm going to suggest to them to think about how, encourage them to change ingredients and try to help them do that. Yeah. That's my little project that I'm doing. Another idea I have in terms of the whole scheme of things is just to think about divesting from corporate agriculture altogether. I mean, especially agricultural biotech, but even, big factory farms. I mean, if people just stopped investing in those companies that are doing that, it would really help. And, people are doing that with fossil fuels, and I see it as a natural extension to do it with corporate agriculture.
Sure.
So that's something else I'd like to see happening. And I know that someone at UVM was actually trying to get UVM to divest from Monsanto, but I don't think I haven't heard any success story.
Traction on that.
Yeah, that's going to take a while. And I know that they're trying to, with the fossil fuel divestment.
Very active divestment campaign.
There's a campaign, but it's taking a while. It takes time. And I think that people feel like they got their hands full with that campaign. I don't know if people want to take on
but they
divesting
will,
from agricultural biotech. But I think it's a natural extension. And I think basically I see we should boycott and divest as well as have labeling laws, because that'll take the money away from these companies. And that's the only way we're going to get a change.
You're right. It's the domination, and like I say many times, the absolute domination of the corporate sector is the biggest impediment to our democracy and for us, to be able to affect some of these changes.
Yeah.
So
I see that sort of as a long-term goal. I mean, really the short-term goal is to get this labeling bill through in Vermont. I think getting restaurants and bakeries and other food businesses involved is really helpful to doing that. And I think people being in touch with their state senators and telling them they want a standalone bill with a definite start date for Vermont. It doesn't involve other states waiting for other states. I think we should get that message through to the senators.
Yeah.
And right now it's in the Judiciary Committee, so if anyone has the wherewithal and they want to be in touch with the members of the Judiciary Committee, that would be really helpful, because it's going to go through that committee first, and if we have a good vote coming out of that committee, that'll help the whole process.
Right. Oh yeah.
So
I still think it stands a very good chance of passage.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of push behind this.
Yeah. So people should look at vtrighttoKnow.org if they want to get information about this. That's a really good resource. Rural Vermont also has stuff on their website. And I just hope a lot of people get involved, and we really got 7 weeks to go on this before the end of the legislative session. And it's the end of a biennium, so it really has to get through, or else we have to start all over again.
Right.
So we're really pushing for it right now.
Yep. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed for passage this year with no trigger clause.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that's how it works.
So, I mean, if you are affluent enough and you do have a retirement portfolio or a stock portfolio, divestment is also key. You can do that on your own.
Oh, yeah.
You can research big ag or the major companies that are behind genetically engineered foods and divest. You can also boycott at the supermarket as best you can.
Oh, that's what I wanted to mention.
Shopping guides.
Yeah, there's you can mention this one.
Right, so this is brought to you by Occupy Central Vermont. This, for more information, visit www.nongmoshoppingguide.com. It's a very simple shopping guide you can bring with you to the supermarket. It's not high tech, but it just leads you through GMO-free choices, and then if you must, and then a list to avoid with their color-coded green, yellow, and red.
And there's also a phone app out there called Shop No GMOs.
Got 30 seconds.
That works on an iPhone. And if you look for that, you could find other non-GMO shopping guides out there.
All right, thanks very much, folks. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Critical Mass TV. We'll see you next time.